for starting, though, we were going to talk about the central nervous system, because this ties into, to me at least, intensity. I think back to what intensity meant to me when I was a kid, listening to AC/DC in my parents' basement, lifting the Sears weight set. And man, I was grinding out those reps as far as I could tell, like I was giving everything I had, but it's changed over time. And my ability, and I've noticed it especially this year, my ability to really grind through difficult reps has grown. It's changed. My definition of what a hard rep is or a hard set is has changed. And I can't help but feel like I've trained my central nervous system. But that's just the thoughts that are floating around my head. I know if I brought it to you, you would have some stuff that would make these thoughts a little more concrete.
Yeah. So it's funny. There's a study from, what was the year? Was it 63? The original study where people talk about the primary driver of muscle strength gains from resistance training comes from the central nervous system was done by Mortani and DeVries. It's like this classic study. And they looked at strength gains versus EMG over the course of about an 8-week study. And you found that the EMG increased in parallel with strength, and that when you're not really seeing any detectable increase in muscle size in those first, although things are initiated like right off the bat, we know this now with more up-to-date measurements. You can see like just one exercise bout will start to shift the myosin isoforms you see in muscle, and you'll start to initiate the growth process. Muscle protein turnover turns on after just one bout. But the gains that you get, take a beginner. So this is just one aspect of training the central nervous system. It's obvious that it's important, and that it goes on when you're training, is take a beginner who increases their strength by 60% on average, whatever, over the first 2 months of lifting. They go from, 95 on the bar on an incline press or a bench press, and now they're doing 135 2 months later. It's totally possible.
Sure.
And then, or even consider that person who, starts off weighing, let's say someone makes really good gains. They start off weighing 150. They're sort of weak as a cat. They're benching 95 pounds. And then they go to, they get to 2.25. So let's say they put on, a good 70 pounds of muscle, and they get really strong, and they're benching 405. So that's a 4-fold increase in strength, and it's not a 4-fold increase in muscle mass. If you're the 100 and the reference man, I believe reference like the standard like 170 kilogram man, so that's 154 pound guy, like in the scientific literature, has like 31, so like less than a little bit around 70 pounds of muscle mass.
Okay.
So it's a doubling of muscle mass to get to 225, let's say, and a quadrupling of strength. The nervous system obviously had something to do with that. It's not all new muscle mass. So there's obviously that you train the nervous system. We see this too when you look at various ways you'd interpret EMGs in terms of what's going on in terms of fiber recruitment. You can get improvements of muscle endurance as well, just because you're learning how to do this. And that's just like looking at it from the perspective of like what signal is coming down the motor neurons into the muscle. And that obviously has to do with your brain. So we can kind of, I'm going to, just for the sake of like what we're talking about now for people listening, like you got your brain and you got like the motor programs that you develop. So let's say you've never juggled before. You want to learn how to juggle. I did this when I was a kid. It was like one year when I was like 8 or something like that. I'm going to figure out how to juggle. It was on New Year's Eve today. I want to be able to juggle next year. And I learned how to juggle. I just kept on for like the whole day. I dropped shit, and eventually I learned I could juggle. And I learned to juggle in one day. I just taught myself by just keeping on trying. I remember doing this, like it's the weird shit I used to do when I was a kid. But I had developed the motor program through practice and practice and practice. So that's what happens that's why Olympic lifters, they can get away with this for other reasons, but the Olympic lifters will do those 3 Olympic lifts. And a lot of the Olympic lifts are a power clean and a snatch. Those are mainly concentric movements, and they drop the bar intentionally because those lowering movements cause muscle soreness. They want to avoid the inroads into muscle recovery. They don't want to make the muscle sore. They want to train the nervous system. And you're getting plenty of loading with those heavy loads, doubles and triples that they're doing. and that will provoke muscle growth. And a lot of those folks already have a tendency to grow muscle easily. That's why they're at the top of the sport and doing that sport. But they want to practice those Olympic lift techniques with the heavy loads as much as they possibly can, because that's the central nervous system. And actually, there's actually been research been done. I think this was Paratesh's stuff, where they've documented that strength gains in elite level, like world class Olympic lifters, that are substantial, like literally 5-10%, without changing weight classes. And that's all That's all going to be all technique based. So that can be done. So your nervous system is there to basically. It is the largest part of strength gains in the gym in most every situation. I mean, take your average, person who goes from beginner to all the muscle they put on. Of 20 pounds of muscle, they might double their strength over the course of doing that, but they didn't double their muscle mass.
Yeah.
So you definitely train the central nervous system, without a doubt. So then the other side of that, so that's just sort of training those motor programs. But then there's also the whole other aspects of the black box, the psychological aspects that you're talking about learning how to grind and learning how to take yourself to places where you haven't previously been. And some of that are things like disinhibition being a big one. So there's a paper, I wrote an article for Elite FTS. I'm trying to think what the name of the paper is. But or the name of the article is, the paper that I talk about in there, at least it's a large part of the article, is by Kai and Steinhaus from like 67. I may have talked about this here. It's a study where it's a paper, something like factors modifying the expression of human strength. And they did this shit before human subjects committees were what they are now. They couldn't get away with this. They wouldn't be able to do this nowadays. They'd never get approved. They took volunteers. And there was at least one person who was highly trained, like they said. I think they called him a weight trainer or something like that. He was a world class strength athlete of some sort. And they had them just do an isometric arm curl, basically elbow flexion, and they measured a baseline, sort of familiarized them to it, and then they wanted to see what things they could do to make them stronger. So one of the things they did was they got them drunk. And they disinhibited, people say it gets rid of your inhibitions. Well, they pulled harder. So they went from this, probably pretty sterile, here we are in the lab, and the guys with the lab coats and the pocket protectors, and they're writing things down. It's like, okay, push as hard as you can, or pull as hard as you can. It's like, okay, good. And then they got them drunk, and then they started going to town, right?
Yeah, I bet.
They gave them amphetamines.
While they were drunk, or different time?
There was a different trial. I don't think they did any combos. Yeah. That would have been interesting. Yeah, who knows? The amphetamines did the same.
Huh, okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
They got a starter pistol and scared the bejesus out of them by shooting off this gun right next to their ear while they were pulling, and of course they pulled harder.
Yeah.
They screamed at them. So just in which of course the same thing is going to happen when you encourage someone. You're screaming at someone in the gym. So if, for instance, and this is kind of an aside, in a research situation, if you'd have to control the amount of encouragement that you give your subjects. Either you come in and you have the same person who does his or her best job to encourage you the same way each time, or you don't do any encouragement, pretty much, which just sucks because it's totally sterile and that's not any fun at all. But that makes a huge difference. It was demonstrated in this study. So those are all things up in the brain that are involved with disinhibition. At least that's how they interpret removing those inhibitions. And one of the most powerful effects they found was from hypnosis.
Oh, yeah.
They hypnotized everyone. And this is published in the Journal of Applied Physiology.
Okay.
Which is a very well-known, it's been around for forever. It's a well-known, high impact factor journal. Like, no one's going to, you get published in JAP, it's like, hey, bow down to you, man. Like, you got into that's with the big boys. You're playing big time there in Journal of Applied Physiology. And, of course, this was a while ago, but still, in their methods section, to document the effectiveness of the hypnosis that they did, the hypnotist took from the subject pool the person who he deemed to be the least amenable to hypnosis. And that happened to be this strength athlete who was just like, whatever, like bullshit. You know, he's calling you can imagine, probably like, you can't change my strength. You can't hypnotize me. He was like, it's a world-class athlete. So he's got that maybe aggressive demeanor, like fuck you, you ain't changing me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they put him under hypnosis. This is in the method section, and I have the quote in my article, and I may even read this on other podcasts. And in the method section, they describe the procedure the hypnotist did to demonstrate the effectiveness of hypnosis. He told that subject while he's under hypnosis that I will be touching a hot poker to your hand just briefly. Here we go. I'm going to do that. And when he touched the guy's hand with a ballpoint pen, no hot poker, nothing damaging to the tissue, he pulled his hand away like he'd been burnt. And a blister formed.
That's the weird part. I don't get. I remember you telling this to us before. A blister formed. The guy touched a ballpoint pen to his hand. He believed that it was hot, and therefore it burnt him. It's crazy.
It's in there, it's in there.
But it's in it. This is in like a legit journal. This is not. That's not the National Enquirer.
It's not as legit as you get in the biological sciences. Yeah, it's like, JEP's big time. They do
crazy.
like heavy duty biology based stuff. In this case, it was a psychobiological type of thing.
That's insane.
So that's the thing. Like you go and like people say like imagine. Like Kai Green's there was an interview with him where he's talking about tapping into rage.
Yeah.
And, I talk about, visualization. I've got another article on Lead FTS about visualization being very, very effective. And these are all things that are going on in your central nervous system, in your brain, in your mind, to allow you to improve performance. You can actually train people where they just visualize performing an exercise and get strength gains on order of the same ones that you would get if they actually did the exercises.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Like over the course of many weeks, like a 10-week training period on like Group A just imagines themselves doing bicep curls and Group B actually does bicep curls. Well, you don't get that much muscle growth. Like if you get like a 5%, like you might get like 10% increase in muscle cross-sectional area, let's say over 8 or 10 weeks. It's pretty good growth. 5% is what I got in one of my studies on average.
Okay.
I think 5 or 7% is training a quad. And that was with electrical stimulation, which this was in trained people, but 10% is pretty good. So, but you can get a 30, 40% increase in strength or weight that you can use for X number of reps in that period of time. So most of that strength comes from the motor program. And that motor program can run by visualizing and imagining actually doing what it is that you're going to be tested on, in this case, in the scientific study. So you can practice those things virtually in your mind's eye and create a tremendous strength improvement, training effect.
It makes me think about, for anybody who's been listening to bodybuilding podcasts, the people who are always serious in the gym, they're the ones that come, the guys who are making the great progress, they talk about like, oh, you got to put your phone away. You got to focus. Don't talk to people. You got to get in there and have purpose. And we all have our own styles as to how we want to train. Mm-hmm. But all this leads me to that, I guess, is that, I'm not saying you need to be hypnotized to go into the gym, but I think there is something to be said about visualization, especially when you're doing progressive overload and thinking to yourself like, okay, I'm going to get that 150 pound dumbbell for 12 reps today. It's going to happen. Being able to see that in your head, carry it out in your head before you actually even touch the weight.
The research suggests, and there's a couple I'm recalling, it's been some time since I looked into this specifically, but there's a couple different paradigms that have been tested, but they share the commonality in that you want to rehearse everything you can come up with in the sensorily during the actual visualization procedure. So if let's say it's a squat and you're going for a PR with 405 pounds and you want to get 12 reps, so you would literally get into there and you would maybe even smell the chalk if the chalk is something you smell, and you would imagine the knurling on the bar and the way the bar fits down in your back, and maybe it tears at your skin a little bit if that's what happens when you do that. What it feels like when you unrack that and you have total control of the bar and the bar is your bitch, as opposed to, oh fuck, this is a heavy bar.
Yeah.
Like and what you see like what you see, like if there's a mirror in front of you, you see yourself squatting down, or maybe you don't see anything, or maybe you just see a blur. Some people just do a blur, that happens to them. They unfocus. But everything you feel, see, the sensation in your muscles, and for me, can be an important one. Like sometimes there can be a sort of a potential for a mental breaking point during a set where you get to the end of the set and you like all of a sudden think, okay, 3 left.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to get 3 and this will be done. And that can be a very smart way to train. I'm not saying don't do that. If you think if 3 is all you got, then 3 is all you got. But then there's also those times when, and I actually employ this sometimes a lot with myself, is I will set a number beyond which is probably reasonable. And imagine that. So I can set, okay, so I'll say I'm getting fucking 15 with this son of a bitch.
Okay, yeah.
And most I ever got was 10. So I start off that set, and sometimes that's backfired on me because I start going so rapidly and trying to just bang out the reps that my form fails.
Mm-hmm.
So now I know I have to visualize that, and I visualize myself going through like that 8th rep when it looks like he's got like 1 left, and I'm like, no motherfucker, this is when the shit starts.
Yeah.
And with that feeling, like when you have that mojo working where you're like every rep is going to be my biatch here, rep by rep, contraction by contraction, and you go past what you would have otherwise because you got the mojo working. There's just that's happening. If you've seen that once, you've just done it. It's right there in your mind in all the ways you can imagine. This is kind of the important part, is that it's not like you just say it. You have to see it and experience as much as you can. And like that, that thought like, oh fuck, my legs hurt like shit. Like you don't want that thought. You want that thought of like, this is what I want my legs to feel like.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive past this shit. So you rehearse all those thoughts. And you ever have and this is just something I just sort of thought of. You ever have a workout where you maybe start off, you're a little tired, and you're getting things going, but you start doing pretty well?
Mm-hmm,
this happens
absolutely.
when people are sick all the time. They go in feeling like shit and they have a great workout.
Mm-hmm.
And you get like halfway through your workout, and all of a sudden you just feel completely revitalized. And you feel like everything, like as opposed to like you're starting to slow down as the workout progresses, you're actually like picking up speed. And it's because you've had multiple wins, so to speak, during that workout. It's the way I sort of see it.
Yeah.
You've been kicking ass. You've had all these sets that you just like barreled through. And now you've actually experienced that driving through those reps where like this shit's getting hard and really pushing to a true failure point. You can do that and bypass the need to having had done some previous sets where you experienced that by visualizing all that in the first place. And visualization is gigantic. And, there are stories of, like skilled athletes, like basketball players and, people who, baseball pitchers and people of that ilk who have a very skill-oriented, motor program detailed task as part of their activity, their sport. And they can practice those things in their mind, but you have to practice well, too. You can't just practice sloppy. So same thing goes for the visualization. So there's that. So the important point here, like there's this sort of black box. That's the term that a guy from back in my graduate school days in Texas, Eddie Coyle, was he still is an exercise physiologist, did a lot of work for Gatorade, done some phenomenal stuff like examining the physiological limitations to endurance cycling. And he like over the course of like 12 or 15 years, he created this really kind of cool line of research where he demonstrated like the glycogen becomes limiting, when people bonk. So he sort of demonstrated that and how you can, supplant that perhaps with drinking Gatorade and blah, blah, blah. But he used to just talk about, and people would every once in a while ask like, so what about the brain? Like, what about effort levels? And he's like, we don't worry about the black box. And he would say that like facetiously. He knows there's a lot of shit going on there, but he's like, for the purpose of this class, we have to focus here and recognize that these are some limitations. But there's a guy named Tim Noakes, Noakes. People want to look him up. I think I cite him in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. And he talks about the central governor theory, and he may have coined that term. I'm not sure, but so the central nervous system is the governor to performance. Just like you can, like, on like semis on the highway, they put a governor on their accelerator, on their their throttle so that they can't exceed the speed limit, drive too fast. Yeah, so there's this governor theory, and he's got, in the course of like, he's got at least one, maybe two, another, probably various versions now of a review of the literature demonstrating the ways in which you see that the brain seems to be the penultimate limiter to performance, at least at the highest levels. And hypnosis is part of that. The effect of drugs, some of the things they talked about in that early study, expectancies and what competition can elicit in people. So like you can find that when you put like, at least in the lab, you put like competitive cyclists on a cyclergometer and have them race, do like a standard time trial race. And if they will try to pace, and they're really good at pacing themselves. They know, they've been used to like, this is the pace I can maintain. This is my lactate threshold. I go too fast, and then I will end up having to slow down. And so they optimize their race pace. But if you put them against a simulator who's outpacing them a little bit, like someone to compete against, they will go faster.
I bet, yeah.
And that's like why I say like the best training partner is someone who's going to make you their bitch every day. I'm using the word bitch a lot today. For some reason.
You are. What's up with that?
I don't know, bitch. Who's your bitch? Who's your biatch? Anyway, so that just slipped out, man. I don't know what's going on.
It was good.
I must have a tumor somewhere.
I don't know, bitch.
Probably several. There's a soundbite for you.
Yeah.
But they will race faster when you have competition. So, and everyone has seen that. How many times have you heard, like, you think you train hard and then you go, there's always someone else who trains harder.
Yeah.
And you go try to keep up with them, and you find a new level, and you're like, holy shit, I had no idea I could do that.
Yeah. I think that's
been. Abiad had a video that he like kind of co-produced with the guy that is like a competitive eater, I think, and I just sort of listened to part of it. And the guy's very entertaining. He's bright, and so he went and he trained with Fuad, and then he had like a Five Guys hamburger eat off thing afterwards. Okay. But the guy went and they trained legs, and they did what one of Fuad's standard training sessions, which is much higher volume this guy's used to. And the guy trains pretty hard. Like he didn't just start yesterday, but he's like he never thought he could do some of those things. He's never gone that far at all in his life.
Yeah.
And that's just like a recent example. I literally heard, like 12 hours ago and listening to YouTube when I was walking the dogs, I think.
I think that's one of the things people are running into with all the quarantine stuff when they've talked about being demotivated training from home. Not only, it's not just having training partners, but like having the other people. When we talk about like the energy of a gym, I think that that's part of that, just having other people around you that are pushing themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much to this. There's so much that's going on in our subconscious. Like one of my favorite placebo studies, I've talked about the Dianabol study here, the steroid studies, where people, and like there's other examples. Another kind of cool one from cycling, which popped into my head because I just was mentioning cycling, is they could give people, they tell them that they're getting different doses of caffeine under different conditions, all of which are placebos. Huh. And their performance is improved in a graded fashion depending on the size of the dose they were told were given.
I'll be damned.
So when they're given like, here comes your big dose of caffeine, you should kick ass today, and like they kick ass that day, and like today you don't get any caffeine, so good luck, hope you make it through.
Yeah.
And they fucking drag ass.
Yeah. I think pre-workout is like that for a lot of people too. That I think that when you started training, or even when I started training, pre-workout wasn't even an invention yet, really. I mean, they had Ultimate Orange.
Ultimate Orange.
Yeah, they did have that, but it didn't catch on the way that it has nowadays. I know people who bought a gym membership and bought a tub of pre-workout. They've only known to train with that. There is a mental thing of like, I got to have at least something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Like there have been times. This happened, like it doesn't happen very often, but it's happened usually when I'm dieting down and I'm taking my fat burners, which basically end up being pre-workouts.
Yeah.
I get to like running around, and like sometimes I'm on a motorcycle now. This wasn't a problem in the past when it's happened, and I just forget to take like one of my doses in the middle of the day. Or I get out and I just I usually have like all those things in triplicate. I have a little box in my cooler I carry with me, blah, blah, but I just forgot. And then I go to the gym in the afternoon. And then I start going through my checklist of like, have I done anything to get ready? I'm like, oh shit, I forgot my pre-workout.
Yeah.
but I can't even tell. It doesn't even register with me. It's not like, oh God, I can't train. I'm like, oh, I just kind of forgot that. It's like, oh, I forgot to wash these socks, but it doesn't fucking matter because I'm going to train hard anyway.
Yeah.
So I think some people, they connect the two things, and then that could become a limitation.
Mm-hmm.
Then they've sort of, in an operant conditioning kind of way, leashed themselves to training with a pre-workout because they want to feel that way. It gives them confidence, and it gives them a sense that they're in the right mindset, the right state of central nervous system stimulation in order to train the way they've been training. It's state dependent I'm using this in a very armchair kind of way, but it's state dependent learning. Like, I only know how to train if I'm on pre-workout. I don't know how to train otherwise.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I think we do that a lot. We do that a lot. I think I've found when I've built a ritual around training, like all of us who've lifted for a long time, before you know it, it's like, okay, I have to take my pre-workout, and then I take the IGF, and then I take the insulin or whatever it is. You've got this whole cocktail of things, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. As I'm walking in the door, like you have this whole list of things. It can become overwhelming. I like that idea of stripping it back, though, and recognizing, you know, that those are things that you could become dependent on, and that you don't. I don't know, man. I keep going back. I'm going to tie this into the blister. I don't know if I have a hard time wrapping my head around believing that somebody could believe that they would get a blister from the ballpoint pen and actually get it. But I want to believe. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to believe that's possible, because if it is, it just tells me how strong the mind is and how much I can prepare for a workout or anything.
It's interesting because there's all sorts of accounts, and, you know, how truthful they are, I don't know, of, you know, people healing themselves with their minds. Yeah. You know, all the thoughts about, you know, so-and-so with cancer, and people prayed for them and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, who knows? But I know that there are accounts that seem like they're a little more reasonable, of like mothers who were in car wrecks and they had to lift like a, you know, 800-pound tree off their car to save their child, and they did it somehow. Yeah. Which, you know, would be like, how the hell could that possibly happen? So there's some incredible feats. There's some, like, there are actually heart rate measurements of full-grown adult firefighters, where their heart, like, they're on top of a burning building, you know, a death-defying type of experience, and their heart rate's going 220 beats per minute. That's 220 is supposed to, the most standard used, it has a pretty wide standard deviation, but the most standardly used estimate of your max heart rate is 220 minus your age. So if you're 30, your max heart rate should be 190. So if your heart rate is 220, that's like 3 standard deviations above, which is possible, but that's just a ridiculous heart rate. Yeah. And there's the breath hold diving. Yeah. Which, you know, people can do, which last I looked into this, no one's been able to completely physiologically explain how it is that can be done unless a person's metabolism is slowed in some way, shape, or form. Could you consider the rate of oxygen use just at rest plus the oxygen use to perform the exercise to do the diving? And a lot of that's just going down, you know, so not like actively swimming. And the amount of time, it's like there should be no oxygen left for survival unless metabolism has slowed. And so I'll have to look into that again. Like, that may be one of my little rabbit holes to follow down the next few days. But like, that's sort of like one of those, how do we don't have a physiological explanation for this.
So you mentioned something, and it kind of ties into some of the further thought I've had about this. So, you know, if I'm able to grind through reps and endure and handle more now than I could in the past, and, you know, you mentioned like the lady who picks up the tree off the car or whatever.
Those are anecdotal reports.
Those things happen. You know, you hear somebody lifting a car off of their kid or whatever. Those things do happen. But those things, like those people who do those things, they aren't doing that every day. We're in fitness and bodybuilding, we're trying to do that at least every week, you know?
Well, check this, because there's another placebo experiment that, and I can find the reference, that they've done this. They've done experiments where they used a topical anesthetic like a lidocaine and exposed people repeatedly to, I think it was an ice bath, which you put your arm in an ice bath, and that's very, very painful. It's a total perturbation of your autonomic nervous system. It's very, very stressful. And then they can test various other things, and you can't keep your hand in there very long.
Yeah, bet.
It's a pain tolerance test. Women tend to do better at that than men. Actually, they can keep their arms submerged longer. But there's all sorts of cool things too. Like there's also a study. Normally, what we have is vasoconstriction in that case. That's why people have frostbite, and the idea there is the body's conserving the blood to stay in the core of the body, keep the core alive, and the core includes your brain. So if you're brain dead, the rest of you doesn't matter. But if you lose an arm, it's better to lose an arm and still have a brain than to lose a brain and have functioning arms for the donor, I guess. So normally you have vasoconstriction, but there's studies of New England wharf workers, like fishermen, who are constantly putting their hands in ice cold water, and they can do that, and they actually have a vasodilatory response. Their system has learned to reverse the natural flow of blood, which normally is reduced, to increase flow there, so that their hands can stay warm while they're dipping in this ice cold water and pulling the fish out of the buckets or what have you. So ice cold water. So you can reverse those things with constant. You can reverse the normal autonomic response, and of course this is what yogis do. They can drop their heart rates down to like really, really low levels.
Okay. Yeah.
With just their breath. And the thing I was going to say back to the arm and the topical anesthetic is that they've done placebo studies where they exposed someone. I think it was a cold water immersion. Exposed their arm to that. Arm gets really cold. They experience that. Then they put a lidocaine on there, which numbs them. And then they give them various exposures to actually a true numbing experience from using the pharmaceutical topical that numbs their arm and makes it not hurt or not hurt as much. And then they give them a placebo. They say, okay, we're going to do another one with, blah, blah, blah. And they put their arm in there and like, no, it doesn't hurt at all. It's like, okay, great. And there's nothing on there to numb their arm.
Huh.
They just think it's going to be numb because they've experienced that. And what they put on there looks and feels and smells exactly the same as what actually did. So they were previously exposed to that situation where the pain was gone.
Yeah.
So if you go, and this is where I think, call it self-hypnosis, call it, learning to grind or what have you. If you repeatedly go in there and, one of my, I'll just a little personal thought here, like one of my favorite songs, a song by Anthrax called Safe Home.
Okay.
And one of the themes in the song is like, this is my safe home, is in the gym. And if you can create that experience in your head where this place that I go to, which is just mind-bogglingly painful and full of maximal effort and potentially exhaustion, is a place that I create for myself. And this is my house, baby. This is where I fucking live. You can go there repeatedly. And each time you can go there, you can go a little bit deeper into the house and explore it a little bit more. And next thing you know, it's not like a haunted house where you're scared shitless. Am I going to, what's going to happen? This is awful. Like, let me out of here. I can't wait till this set stops. Instead, it's like, now we're on my territory, baby. This is where I live in these last reps at the end of the set. And that's sort of an analogy. You may even say those things to yourself in your head. I do sometimes. Every once in a while I'll say, who's your fucking daddy? Like in the middle of a set. And that's fun as hell, right? I've actually said that. Who's your daddy? And that's because, like, here we go, bitch. We're going in. We're going after it. It's time to go into my home. This is where I live, just for these brief moments in time. And I've accumulated over years of experience, as you have, and you're starting to see now, familiarity with that place psychologically, where you have to disinhibit, where you have to pull back, where you have to be able to recognize that this pain and this effort is all part of what you are trying to evoke.
Yeah.
Like, this is where you want to be.
Yeah.
This is not foreign territory that you need to escape from. This is your homeland, so to speak, that you want to go deeper into, so you can keep on doing that. And that's like learning to take charge of that central governor and disinhibit and bring out things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So you can imagine then, like, that's part of this visualization experience, is imagining what it's like in the home. So,
but does it stress you?
To the haunted house, and you're like, just a sec, and you're like, oh shit, I know what's in there. But what if you stop and say, I've been here before,
Yeah.
I know just what it's going to look like. And then you open the door and then you go in and it looks just as you just imagined it. Totally different experience. So what were you going to say?
But does it stress you? Does it stress you more because you are digging deeper and deeper and deeper into, you know, this level of discomfort? Is that harder on your body over, you know, repeatedly going further and further?
Of course. Yeah. Like that's the point. The stress is the stimulus in that context. There's distress and there's eustress. People kind of use those terms like when you win the lottery and you're happy as shit, that's stressful, right? That's your sympathetic nervous system gets jacked up and like that's a form of stress. It's a pleasurable one.
Yeah.
But it's also a kind of a stress. And yeah, absolutely. When you do those 2 extra reps beyond the 10 that you would have done otherwise,
yeah,
without a doubt. But those physiologically are they're the most effective reps, so to speak, which is a really nice term just to sort of conceptualize all this. So those are the ones that hopefully produce the stimulus that then evokes greater adaptation than what you currently were maintaining in training up until that point.
Okay.
So if you just kept on doing those 10 reps with that weight, you're not going to grow. But if you start adding a rep every week, then you're going to have a unique stimulus that hopefully produces an adaptation, which supports the ability to again produce a unique stimulus, meaning you add another rep, which as long as you eat and rest and recover enough, then you can have a greater adaptation so that the next time you could even get another rep, and then like the whole system, stimulus, recovery, stimulus, eat, sleep, grow, eat, sleep, grow, eat, sleep, grow.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking of like, when I spoke to Chris Duffin and when I listened to him and Victoria talking, he was saying like, this is going to kill me. That was his thought, was like that he felt like you could only do this so many times. You can only put, like, he was training with 900 pounds on his back. And he was like, every time I train, this is killing me, is the way he felt about it.
Yeah, there is. I mean,
and that's extreme, we aren't, I'm not squatting 9. You can
only get away with so much. Ronnie Coleman is the, quintessential example of someone who just, he put everything into it. And now he sort of paid the price. In Chinese medicine, they have a nice way of kind of conceptualizing this. And you see this in all sorts of forms. And one of these we've talked about and you'll relate to is you have the various energies of the organs and all the bits and pieces of Chinese medical theory, but you have in your kidney is where your sort of root energy is, your kidney energy, and especially your kidney essence, which is actually related to your ability to reproduce. And it's something that you start off with, at least according to most texts, and I've always asked, it's always been like, can you replenish this or can you not? It's like you start with a given amount of this kidney essence, or Jing is the name for the vital substance. And then as you age, it gets lower, less and less and less. Like having gray hair is a sign to one degree of less essence, right? Your bones getting less, low back pain, which tends to happen, et cetera, et cetera. But every time you go through something really stressful period in your life, actually the teeth are manifestations of the bone, which is fed by the kidney's energy in Chinese medicine. And someone who runs hard, who lives hard, are people who are meth heads. Yeah. And you see them, like, they age like rapid. 15 years in 6 months. You see the before and after. And their teeth fall out too. And that's malnutrition. You explain that in various other ways, but that's the Chinese medical way of conceptualizing this. So obviously, and this fits in with the rate of living hypothesis, which is one idea that is sort of behind the thought that, to some degree, like free radicals and which are producing greater extents, the higher metabolism, and the higher metabolism, the shorter your actual lifespan. Suggests that the faster you live and the harder you live and the more you live, so to speak, the shorter your life's going to be. So you kind of have like and there have been various philosophers who've had this sort of thought over the years. You've got sort of this quantifiable amount of life. Yeah. And you can burn out or you can fade away, so to speak, like the guy from the Highlander. You remember that, the bad guy from the Highlander? It's kind of foggy now. Burn out and fade away. Def Leppard. Yeah. Anyway, so there's something to say for that. And so, you live really hard and fast, and those sorts of things are like, because after he'd do one of those 900-pound squats, he'd probably be fucked for like 4 or 5 days. Yeah, yeah. And then he'd do it again the next week, training for 1,001.
You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
it's the extreme, of course. But then I do ask myself, like, you know, even on an exercise like an isolation movement, I'm thinking about hamstring curls. Looking at my machine, I'm looking at it because it's right there, so I have a hard time not like having the conversation this way.
It's like talking to me, motherfucker.
What, bitch?
Yeah, I'm watching you.
So, but I have realized, like, I can grind through these reps even when it's not hardly moving, even when it stops, and I'm just giving everything I have, and I'm like holding, and then eke out, tiny bit more. Like the reps that I'm doing on this at times, it's like stuff that I know I couldn't have done years ago. And then afterward, I'm wondering, like, well, what did that do to my recovery right now? You know?
And that's the thing. I think and this is why, you know, this is built into fortitude training. Those failure reps, I limit those. And you're keying into, like, this is, you kind of said it for me there in a way. Like, you've heard me say this a million times. Maybe it's clicking for you differently, but you limit those. You do those to sort of test yourself and develop that capacity to some degree.
Yeah.
Plus, that gives you those are highly effective reps, but you also pay the piper for them.
Yeah.
Because the inroads to recovery, and this is purely, like, I've heard many people say this, and I've been saying it for a long time. That, you know, you can only get away. John Meadows has said it for a long time too. Like, you have to use those intensification techniques where you have multiple failure points, like a drop set, or, you know, maybe if you're doing a cluster set where you have more than one failure point, you get a superior stimulus, you know, in the 2 reps in reserve and 1 rep in reserve from those last couple effective reps. But you also get, depending on the person, an exponentially greater inroad to recovery overall. So, yeah, you do 3 sets and stop 3 sets short of failure, no big deal. But you do 1 set where you end up, like, getting one of those grinder reps that is just absolutely mind-boggling, and that might be the equivalent stimulus, at least in terms of what your nervous system has been taxed in doing. So, and everyone's balance is different there. That's the thing. You know,
yeah,
and that's where the to some degree where it's one factor that determines how much volume someone can get away with training with.
Yes, yeah.
If they don't train like you do, and like their failure point, you know, the reps. And I have a post, had all sorts of computer problems, so I haven't been able to put up anything. But if you look at skeletal muscle as it fatigues, so you can, like, take a muscle and just stimulate it. So you take the nervous system completely out.
Yeah.
And you just watch its force production. It will kind of decline in this sort of exponential way, and you'll see it kind of decline. So that's the basis of using velocity of movement as a way to dictate effort level during resistance exercise. People are starting to investigate this now. So what you see as someone nears the end of a set, if taken to failure, is that bar speed slows.
Yeah.
On any movement they're using a bar. So you can use velocity. Bar speed is a sort of high-tech fancy. It may be overkill in many practical situations, but you can use that as a way to limit the inroads or limit the effort put into each set. So, you know, you stop all your sets when your bar speed slows to X percentage of the initial rep's bar speed. That means you're getting X amount of fatigue because you're trying to go as, you know, at a faster pace, but you simply can't.
Right.
Because the fatigue forces you. So that might stop you 2 or 3 reps shy. You could just stop 2 or 3 reps shy as well. But the thing that we know then is that when muscle fatigues, it doesn't like, you know, force, and it's like also boom, the forces just drop off like that. It's like a light switch turning off. It fatigues when energy supply can't match the energy demand, and that is a slow, gradual process. It's a function in muscle of fiber type, the enzymes that are in those fibers, the mitochondrial content, the economy or efficiency of the myosin, which is a function of fiber type, depending on how you test it, all those things. And so faster fiber types were more fatigable, and slower fiber types are less fatigable.
Yeah.
But you still see, like, this gradual decline of some sort. And if you're training with a nervous system that's driving the muscle to its maximal capacity, like E-stim would and does,
okay,
you're going to see the same kind of fatigue curve. So you'll be rep, and then maybe you try one more and you, like, move it a little bit and then you're done.
Yeah.
And you can see that, like, most people stop about 3 reps shy of that. and that's because their nervous system, their psychology, their central governor is not evoking. Just stops the set as a protective mechanism, probably in most cases. So the idea that's put forth by Tim Noakes and the central governor is that even in almost all circumstances, even in high level sport, there's still something left in the tank. Most of the time, in almost all circumstances, and there's something there. And most people, like, they're so far from a max effort and best performance, just because of the central governor. So back to where I kind of started. Like, there's the motor programming aspect of it. Like, you could have someone who, let's say, is a highly trained athlete in, like, a wrestler, or like a intermediate distance runner, 400 meters, like some really hard shit that requires you have to know how to push and push through pain. So their central governor and their ability to disinhibit and drive is really pretty well advanced, but it's specific to their sport. So it's the limitation there isn't the central governor aspect. It's not their psychology. When they go in the weight room, it's because they've never done those lifts before. So you'll see they train, and like you probably had clients, maybe like even a beginner client, and it's like, wow, they train really hard, but they're wobbly and this sort of thing. So their limitation there is probably still motor skill. Because they've got years of training and pushing and fighting through the pain. Like, it's not a lack of effort in their case. Yeah. It's just they don't know how to do the exercises. And they'll learn that really quickly. So their effort level doesn't change. And then there are some people, like, who have both the motor skill issue, and then they have to learn how to train harder. And, like, in your case, you got the motor skills down, and now you've shifted your training, so you're exposing yourself to more of those high effort, like, grinder reps. And now you're working on that central governor. And, of course, that's going to require that, because you're doing more of those really all-out reps, that your volume is going to have to come down.
Yeah, that's exactly where I've been.
Yeah. Yeah, so the central nervous system gets trained. Yes, in various ways.
Wow. I knew if I asked you this, Scott, that you would have a lot to say and you'd be able to expound upon it. So thank you.
Yeah. It's just, like, it's really, like, this whole central governor thing is really fascinating, because it doesn't deny the fact that, you can feel when the glycogen levels are low, and that contributes, like, is a limitation, but there's multiple limitations, to performance at a higher level that can all, the limiting factor can be at so many different levels. And so it's a long time ago, I did a talk on causes of fatigue. And I think maybe I wrote an article on this. I've written about it somewhere, but so, like, literally you can, like a locus of fatigue, or loci of fatigue, like locations of fatigue. And it's like, so there's the central governor, that's the brain. And that can even be a function of, like, the neurotransmitters in there that are feeding, or sort of the amino acids that are entering the blood, like tyrosine versus L-tryptophan, that are feeding the catecholamine levels, the dopamine levels in the brain. Like, that's one thought, that the exposure to tryptophan versus tyrosine and the entry of amino acids in the brain can be a cause of central fatigue in the brain. Yeah. So there's all these potential, like, neurotransmitter, potentially just psychological issues. Like, what if you have someone who grew up with an overbearing father who forced them to exercise, and they've got psychological trauma and some of that psychological trauma, it actually creates epigenetic changes on the DNA of the neurons of the brain in areas that are responsive to trauma. And I've discussed this with a friend of mine who's a therapist. So literally the brain, the neurons in those areas of the brain that were activated during traumatic experiences now turn on genes differently and react differently, I bet, when re-exposed to things because of these epigenetic changes. Epigenetics basically determine to what extent and with what likelihood and the ease with which genes are turned on or turned off in response to the stimuli that the cells are exposed to. So you got someone who was forced to exercise, and they had an overbearing father who, if they didn't win, would say, "You didn't win, so we're going to the weight room. You got to get stronger." Then make them squat all night long or some crazy shit. Gesundheit. Good mute. You've got nice mute skills there.
I got it. I've done it before a couple times.
Yeah, it's not your first rodeo. So that person, when they get in the gym, And now they're way like, the daddy issues they think are kind of resolved, but they get in the gym and like, well, they want to squat because it feels good for their legs, and it's like a saying thing, and like now they start having like these friggin' flashbacks, like almost PTSD like things of having to squat because they lost and they didn't get daddy's approval. Like that's happening like at an epigenetic level in the brain.
Huh.
And then we can like at the other end of the extreme, you could say, well, I think this might be a function of, the interaction at the T tubules in the sarcoplasmic reticulum in terms of calcium release, because calcium is the intracellular signaler for myosin-actin interaction of the cross-bridge cycle. So, you've got a limitation there in those cells, in those fast switch fibers, because you're not in terms of calcium handling. So there's a guy named Bob Fitz who's written about all this stuff. So there's evidence that calcium handling is a locus of fatigue in certain fiber types, I believe, in like rats' muscle fibers.
Okay.
So which is it? Is it the fact your daddy was an asshole, or that you have a bad ryanodine receptor, somewhere in your fast twitch fibers? So there's all these different things from literally top to bottom.
Huh.
The thing that could slow your truck down could be a loose lug nut. Or it could be like, something in the throttle mechanism, or anything, or the fact that you're out of gas, or your oil's low, or all these different things. So we always think, well, it's the engine, that must be it, but it could be a bad axle that's twisted, a million different things in just a relatively simple thing like an automobile. And our bodies are, infinitely more complex.
Wow.
In a certain way. So yeah, the brain's a big part of it. And I think this is the one that, at the upper end of like performance and doing the stuff you're trying to do, that I'm trying to do, that a lot of listeners are trying to do, and eke out gains after years of training when gains come pretty easily. A lot of it's here. So I had a funny story related to like going to the gym with like the the badass mindset thing. So one of the things in fact, you asked me about a New Year's resolution. I don't really have one, but there's one of the things I'm trying to do more of. Yeah. And that's just sort of speak my mind freely.
Okay.
And be kind of authentic, and just sort of say what, be just truthful and honest, and step away from the personas that I tend to wear in various situations. I've been wearing them since I was a kid. And I was at the gym, and so there's two people two women in the gym. They're doing Olympic lifts, and one was having trouble with the straps. It's kind of comical. She never used them before.
Oh yeah.
So we all kind of, she and the person showing were kind of laughing. So I was doing what I was doing, and then I had like 5 seconds when I was switching muscle groups, and I said, "Hey, let me show you quick the trick to the straps." I put my straps on, and you use your thumbs to bring the straps around. You can put them on there really easily. So it took like 8 seconds, and she's like, "Oh wow, that looks really easy." I'm like, "There you go. Good luck with it." And I went back to what I was doing, but another guy in the gym saw me take that break, and this guy likes to talk. Super nice guy.
Oh yeah.
But he's on my do not talk list because
he
likes to talk. And once you get me going, I'll start rambling, as people know me to do.
Right.
And so he's like, "Hey Scott," and I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "I want to introduce you to someone." I'm like, "Just because I helped her out doesn't mean I'm open to a big long conversation."
Did you say that?
So yeah, I did. That's exactly, and I didn't say it like you're a dick, but like I knew like he wouldn't have said that to me had I not stopped. He's like, that was my chance,
right?
Because you could see when someone is like waiting to like get their chance, and I just have to avoid eye contact with some people. I can fist bump and we can talk for 5 seconds. We don't, and then other people, like, you just can't do that because they want to tear you away. They don't understand that groove that sometimes you kind of have to be in for safety reasons.
And I know the listeners, I'm going to interject here. The listeners might not know this about you, but you feel that you need to respond. There's times that I've texted you and I've just been like, just sent a text. And I'm like, Scott will get to it when he gets to it. But then I know you've been like, I had a really busy day and I didn't get a chance to text until now. And then you give me this long explanation back. And it's like you felt like you needed to, like, if I came up to you and I'm like,
I'm much better at that.
Good. But I've noticed that about you. I could imagine that if I walked up to you in the gym, I was like, "Hey, Scott, how's it going? I want to tell you about this." And you'd feel like, okay, now I'm obligated. Like there'd be part of you.
Well, this guy, I'm not even sure to what extent, but somehow he's connected to academia.
Oh, okay.
And I knew like this is going to be, he's going to want a formal introduction. And literally, I am just fucking cranking. I was having a badass workout. I was doing great.
You stop now.
Mojo was totally working, and I'm like, no, I just can't do this. I said because you like to talk, and you will catch me. Next thing you know, we're just talking galore, and So I told him that. And I just kind of like I was, but it was very nice, and because I knew that I did not want to break that away.
Yeah.
And backstory: about 4 years ago, when I tore part of this biceps, was in a similar situation where I was hosting a meetup group for a bodybuilding meetup group, and a guy wanted to follow and just kind of watch me train.
Yeah.
And I felt obligated to kind of teach him and show him what I was doing.
I would too.
And I ended up, yep. And someone else came in, and next thing I knew, I was like, people were running late, and we were going to go eat. So I went and I actually was doing a side lateral machine when I tore my biceps.
Yeah.
And so I injured myself because I had stopped everything, and I wasn't properly warmed up, and my workout got interrupted. So some of it's self-protective. But anyway, the point of me bringing all that up was I've actually, when the one guy walked away, I went and introduced myself to the guy who was referring to and said hello. So I said, we could say this before he comes back, because then he's going to want to talk. But nice to meet you. I'm Scott.
Yeah.
But that was part of the groove that, I had, that was just like, this is what I'm here. This is fun. Like, you wouldn't pull over Lance Armstrong if he's like cruising around, and say, hey, Lance, can I get your autograph? And you're like, I'm on a ride. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until I get done. Not that I don't want to give you an autograph. I love to talk to people. But Lance was he'd set, like, if Lance is on his bike, he's at lactate threshold, he's cruising, he's in the middle of a time trial. I was rocking. I was having a great workout.
Yeah.
And so I just let him, and it was totally fine. We laughed about it afterwards.
Good.
But I was truthful with him. And I still would say that. Like, I even told him, you're on my do not talk list because you like to talk too much. And it's nothing derogatory against the person at all. It's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah, that kind of disarms it too, the way you handled that, versus it being like, if you don't talk about it, then he might think you're just a dick or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a thing. If he doesn't get it, then he doesn't get it. I can't make him get that. The other guy actually apologized for him because he knew why. Like, I think he didn't want that, and he was, I think he's a power lifter. I'm pretty sure he was training for a competition. So
yeah,
there's no reason to be upset. I actually had fun interacting with him. Like, not now, man, no friggin' way. I like that. I think I used the word ass battery or badassery.
Yeah.
Actually. I said, we cannot disrupt the flow of badassery that I have going on right now. And I went about my business. He's like, okay. So anyway, are we getting listeners' questions? I saw you looking. I haven't looked at all. I've been just too busy rambling here.
We did have a couple here. There was one from Brandon. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, let's see. My mouse isn't clicking right. Yeah, this is in reference to another podcast. He says, hey guys, I would love to hear Scott's opinion on the question Skip and S2H answered on the last episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear in regards to how we can make deloads more enjoyable. I know Skip mentioned trying out new exercises / machines that you haven't used before, but I feel like that would prevent a novel stimulus that would prevent a novel stimulus that could potentially increase the amount of muscle damage you experience and lower the ability to recover within the deload week. Would love to hear how Scott would approach a deload and if he's remembered to keep exercises the same or just drop down your volume as most do during a deload.
Brandon, my man, you need to go read the Fortitude Training book.
I'll tell you what Skip had said real quick here.
Yeah, okay.
So Skip had said, he was like, listen, when I do a deload, I like to just go in and have fun with it. He was like, that might be an opportunity for you to, he was like, if you're in a groove, you're not going to try anything different. You're not going to go over and try that machine or try a new exercise. He was like, I've messed around with machines I wouldn't have messed with before when I was in a strict groove. And I found that that's given me an opportunity where, like, hey, I like this chest press. I might give this a try in the future. That's what he was saying, basically. But he said have fun with the deload. Don't overstress yourself with it.
So here's how I do, like, my intensive cruises in Fortitude Training are an answer to Brandon's question. It's like, I think he's read the Fortitude Training because I'm going to be on his podcast here pretty soon.
Nice.
So one, in order to avoid like the increasing muscle damage or what have you, I have people drop down a volume tier. So, and space out their training a little bit. So they train a little less frequently and they drop with a little less volume.
Yeah.
But in line with what we see I looked at the evidence that was available at the time I wrote it. There may be more. I'll have to look on this one as well. But the evidence at the time was pointing, and this is how it's typically done in many, many sports, is you do a taper if you want to have improved performance on the day of a meet. So you keep your effort levels and the quality of your efforts high, but you reduce the volume. So swimmers would still do, maybe a couple time trials with their event, but they cut their yardage in half. And sprinters wouldn't do nearly as many, all-out sprints, or maybe just do shorter sprints, but they still would do sprinting. So they're maintaining the effort level. And then if you do a taper the right way, you come back strong as your performance is peaked.
Yeah.
So that's how I reduce that. They also, as far as the fun goes, the intensive cruises are just muscle rounds, which people find to be the most fun anyway, by far. And muscle rounds are de facto auto-regulated and auto-selected in terms of the exercise. So if you want to use the exercises you've been using, you can, but you can also pick whatever you want. The idea being that, I haven't done a muscle round on that chest press or that leg press or what have you. I want to give that one a shot.
Yeah.
And try out new exercise. So, I want to do like a Meadows row, a muscle round, because I saw John doing Meadows rows and they looked great, or so-and-so, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So you play with those things, and being able to do that is just fun. It also allows you to fit a cruise in and have some standardization. Like when people travel, I have them do just muscle rounds. They don't have to necessarily make a cruise out of it, but that would give you a chance to go to different gyms, because you don't have to go to like that one hammer strength machine,
right,
that's made from the model year, like that's different than the one at the other gym, blah, blah, blah. You can do whatever you want. So, but the volume's less, and the workouts are also spaced out. You're only training like 3 times in a week as opposed to typically 4. So that's how I do it. Less volume, auto-regulate the exercises you select, only go with the muscle rounds, which are fun. And people love the cruises. And if you do it right, at the end of the cruise, you actually take the deload, which is I call an intensive cruise, because it's intense because you still do muscle rounds, which you're not reducing your effort level at all during those muscle rounds, just doing fewer of them. And the last about third of the total time of your intensive cruise, your deload, you just take that time off.
Okay.
So by the time that's a standard way to do it. Everyone can kind of figure out their own recipe, but that's the way it works really well for lots of people as a starting point, at least.
Yeah. And
then when you come back, when you're after that completely free of training period, people are just chomping at the bit, and they just their strength goes sky high. Yeah. And if they've eaten for making muscle gains, typically they've also moved forward a good bit as far as fat-free mass goes. You just kind of see it. They basically, it's a rebound period for many people. So that covers the whole thing. Like, it gives you some structure, but not too much structure. So you choose your exercises, stick with the muscle rounds. You can do whatever you want, but this is just the way I have it. And that way, you've got those muscle rounds, you try out those exercises, and you can then, when the next blast comes around, you can do, with muscle rounds in fortitude training, you can either stick with the same ones, same exercises. You can just keep doing those if you want until you fail to make gains and then switch. Or you can just do something different every time if you like, and just keep a logbook pool of exercises and come back and say, okay, last time I did that was about 5 weeks ago. Let's see if I can beat that performance. Yeah. So that depends on what the person chooses to do, because there's plenty of progressive overload with the loading sets and the other aspects of the program.
Yeah,
so,
I like the sounds of that. And I can see where Brandon's coming from too, that, if you really got into it with a new machine, you could end up being more sore than when you started, if you just went in and just started tearing it up. But I can also see what Skip was saying, where he was saying, you're not going too heavy. In his case, is what he was thinking is he's just having fun with it. And
if you reduce, if it's a deload, then you reduce something.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like a deload is so generic. So if you try a new exercise and you stop 3-4 reps shy of failure as opposed to taking it to failure.
Yeah.
Even if it's a new exercise, that's probably going to be maybe about the same. it kind of depends. Like some people, and this ties into this next topic if we want to go to. These are good questions. We can just save that for the next one if you want. But it depends on how sore people tend to get. Some people, they do a new exercise and it's just like, holy crap, it's like they never lifted before.
Yeah.
And then others are, so it kind of depends, and depends on, like, there's so many different aspects. If you drop your volume to 1/3 of what it once was, so instead of doing 12 sets, you only do 4, and 2 of those are with a new exercise, I think you're going to recover compared to doing 12 sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your volume is so much lower. So you would just say, if I'm going to do all new exercises for this deload, instead of dropping, from 12 to 9 sets, which is what I typically do, or 12 to 8 sets, this time I'm going to just drop down to 6 sets.
Okay.
Because I'm trying out new exercises entirely for the purpose of this deload, and I want to make sure I don't cause that issue. So you would just, if you're scared of the novelty creating excessive muscle soreness, then you just reduce the volume to account for that possibility, and then you avert it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's how I would do it. But
yeah, when I went back into the gym after training chest at home, for months, I started training back at the gym again sometimes, and I'll tell you what, man, I was fried. Because of course I've been using all free weights at home, and there's a couple machines that I really enjoy. So I was like, I'll go to the gym, and it was going to be kind of like a lighter week. I'm going to use these machines. And, oh my gosh, I got totally cooked. I was like, I love the way this feels. The next day, I'm like, man, I haven't been this sore in months.
So this is funny. You reminded me. So there's this gym in south of Orlando that I'd gone to the day after the Masters Nationals, called Kissimmee Muscle.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, you've probably seen it because the Olympia didn't kind of turn out the way I wanted to. I was wanting to get down there when I was at the Olympia this year, but a lot of people went down there. I saw tons of tags, and I actually went up going there about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
For an earlier purpose, and the owner actually posted something, I think, on Instagram of a picture of the two of us. But they've got a line of equipment that's just awesome. I can't remember the name of it right now. It just has this great friggin' feel. Like the converging chest press is badass. Like all of the machines are just great. And I used those, it was the day after the show when I went in there and trained before. So I just used machines, wanted to get a quick one in, just like a full workout, full body thing, to keep the water moving around, all that kind of junk. And but it was like, this feels really good. It felt awesome. I didn't even use a lot of the machines. And I remember asking him, his name is Jonathan. I asked him, I said, man, that line of, I can see why you found or kept that line of equipment. He's like, well, I had to seek that out. He told me the story, but it was entirely not by accident that he had that line of equipment.
No kidding.
And he's like, people love that shit. He said he had a women's physique competitor, and this was, I think, what show was it? There was another, the show before that, with North Americans, I think, was there in Orlando. And this was a women's physique competitor, and she was coming in like 2 days before a show, the day before a show, and she was supposed to be doing like a light, he talked to her for a little while, light workout, and she got in there, and she's just like some women are, they just have ridiculous recovery abilities and just love to train. Mm-hmm. And like he said, she was in there for like 3 hours, and like he went up there, he's like, weren't you supposed to be just like sort of like lightly? She's like, I love this stuff. I can't help myself. I can't stop.
Damn.
It's like, how many sets have you done? She's like, I think like 42.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, stop, stop.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where I was going with it, but yeah, just when you go back into the gym, you just like, you get those new machines that feel so good. Plus they're novel, but you tend to want to also overdo it too. And I did that when I was there. I'm like, I did a little more, but I'm like, just take a couple of the days rest,
Yeah.
I'll live.
We had a couple more things here. One of them is Mr. Scott Stevenson, will you launch your own courses?
Oh, I've thought about that. I've got some other things in mind that I may try to put together. I would do it with my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book. I'm doing hour-long consultations with people, and some people have come to me, like over the course of the years, people like, they line up several of those. We kind of do like, it's not an apprenticeship, but it's a mini sort of guide them through with a half a dozen or a dozen regular consultations to get them going and help just round off their education, what they know or don't know, and they want to try to learn from me. I've thought about that. It's just like, there's various ways I could do it. One thing I've thought about doing and that I could still do is offer CEUs through an existing organization. I can't do that if I offer my own course. And I even had someone come to me asking me to put together a course, but it would have been under his organization. He would have had control over everything. So I've thought about it. What I want to, for a lot of people, they just like the education, and that's cool. But it's also nice when those CEUs or the education is connected with the insurance that a lot of personal trainers need to have. So offering that as CEUs through the NSCA or ISSN, I haven't even talked with them, but through the I'm not even certified through them, but I am through the NSC and ACSM, is a way that allows people to both keep their CEUs and thus their insurance up to speed and maintain those credentials. If I start my own, I'm not going to offer insurance. Maybe I could somehow. I haven't looked into it, but I imagine that's a whole giant endeavor. And doing it, I don't take that half-heartedly or if someone says, I have a fortitude training certification, I want to make sure that, like, I personally would send my mother to you to do fortitude training. You know what I'm saying? Where you can offer all sorts of stuff, and people, like, not so much anymore, but I've seen, like, people who had, like, they had an alphabet soup behind their name because they got every certification possible. Yeah. And that kind of tells me that you don't feel like you know what you're doing because you just had to keep on getting certifications to try to fill that void of imposter syndrome that you feel or incompetence that you don't feel like you can get. So it would be a gigantic undertaking to do that. I've thought about it. And right now I'm sort of filling that void by working with people one-on-one and doing online consultations or phone Skype consultations sort of on a ad hoc basis. Yeah. But there was I took a CEU course, I think through the NSCA long time ago, 15 years ago, that was like a bodybuilding physiology course. So that's something I might do. And I've actually thought about putting together a peak week course, so to speak, to help guide people through the things that I do with peak week and consider the options, because that's a big place where people drop the ball or get overly complicated or have no idea what to do or get dangerous. There's one area of bodybuilding where I feel like the education could probably be the most needed. It's probably, at least in competitive bodybuilding, it's probably with the peak week.
I could see that. Yeah, a lot of people look at it as the secrets too, so it's not always shared.
Yeah, they don't share things. People use a lot of drugs. The diuretics can be really dangerous. They can fuck you up pretty badly. There's a lot of science to be shared there too. It's kind of a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. So that's the thing that I might do course-wise first if I do anything. And what I would probably do, I was planning on doing this through Facebook, but I don't know if I want to now since my Facebook got hacked. God, I'm glad I didn't do it when my Facebook account got hacked. Was do what many people do is they set up a private group on Facebook. And then they charge for entry. I've
seen this. Yeah.
Yeah, it works pretty well. Like you go in, you're part of an 8-week cohort or whatever, and they do weekly live Q&A sessions. You guide people through your training program or what have you. So I do like a 6-week thing to help people guide themselves and clients through a peak week protocol, and then they could have access to that for a year or whatever. Yeah. So they could, through the course of a competitive season, go back and look at the videos and repeat the process that I led them through. Yeah. During the course of the actual course itself. But I don't like Facebook wouldn't be where I'd want to host it now because I know now my account is not at all secure. Well,
if you do, people can keep up with you too through Instagram. They can go over to fortitudetraining.net, byobbcoach.com. And if they wanted to do consultations, that'd be a good place to hook up with you too over at those sites.
I'll say something that's interesting. It's funny, like even like I didn't even see who asked this question. Who was wasn't Brandon? I'm looking. Did you put this question up on the screen?
Motaz.
Rowie? Motaz. Oh, yeah, he and I have spoken about the peak week thing. I know him. Yeah. So it's funny. Very often people come to me asking for courses or those sorts of things. And I have the sense from various in various ways that they haven't really looked at what is available to learn from me totally free. Like if you go on Elite FTS, I have 12 or 15 articles there that cover a lot of stuff that's totally free.
I joined the Mountain Dog website because you had some articles over there that I wanted to read.
Articles over there. I mean, I did a Q&A when John was sick and in the hospital that was like 2.5 hours long. You know, there's tons of stuff over there. He's got some videos over there from seminars that we did together that I presume they're still there, that I think are available to members. And I've had people come to me who want sort of a mentoring type of thing. Hey, could you mentor me as a coach? And I ask, well, have you gotten my book? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, they haven't even read the Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book.
Yeah.
So that's not to like direct that specifically anyone in particular, but I see that almost more commonly than not. Actually, 3/4, maybe the vast majority of the time, it's people who are coming to me. So that tells me that to some degree, it's not that they have exhausted the limitations of what information they can find just by searching. And like you go to my website, it's like, you know, buy all his books. Mm-hmm. Like, you know who Paul Chek is?
I know the name.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He was at Swiss last time it was there. Okay. I don't know. Ken knows him pretty well. He's been to Swiss multiple times. He's a phenomenal guy. He started off sort of an exercise specialist. He's got a number of different books and videos on functional exercise and things of that nature. But now he's a very well-read guy, and he's very sort of a spiritual, kind of the zone of spiritual life coach type of. Okay,
yeah,
area.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
he's a fascinating guy. I really, really like him. I kind of feel a bit of a kinship to him, and he has a 1.5 year long course or something like that, you know, that you can take and you can pay for. Mm-hmm. I'm not aggressively going after this, but I've got a few of his books. I listen to his podcast on a regular basis, and I try to learn as much as I can for him for free. So then, this is what I always tell people: is then if and when I were to ever go and do his course, which I don't think I really would need to, but if I would want to, let's say I went to Paul and I said, hey, Paul, I'd like to apprentice with you. I'd like to become an apprentice in some way. I don't think he offers that. Let's just hypothetically say this is the case.
Right.
I would have been completely up to date on, you know, everything I could possibly find, so that when I do interact with him, I can say, well, you know, here you wrote this, and then 10 years later you wrote this. And so how do you feel about these two things now? Because these ideas are juxtaposed. They're somewhat, you know, contradicting of one another. And so he could give me that answer. Whereas if I have no idea what he's done because I haven't even read his books or looked all over, then that tells me that I haven't even put out the effort that you want to see in an apprentice or you want to see in a student who takes your classes. And maybe that, and this is so common now, I see this so much, and this is like me on a soapbox of academia, but people want to go and get the degrees just to say they have a degree. Because that's what the industry rewards. Is like, do you have a master's degree? We'll pay you more than if you have an undergraduate degree. Or like, I know people who have gone to various places where they offer these sort of mail-in PhD degrees that are really worthless. They don't give you any opportunity for licensure. There's some naturopathy accreditations out there that make you think you're a naturopath, but you can't get licensed as a naturopathic physician because they're not accredited by the accrediting commissions that do that. And people are just gathering degrees because they feel like if they have the letters, that just having made it from A to Z in terms of getting that credential means they will have the knowledge and understanding that will wash away whatever insecurities they might have or feelings of inadequacy in terms of being a coach or being an expert in their area, whatever it might be.
Sure.
And that's not at all what, you know, I think degrees should be about. Not in the least. So someone comes to me and they say, you know, hey, like, do you offer classes or I'd like to apprentice with you? And I say, well, have you read my books? Like, no, I haven't. It's like, where do I get those? And I'm like, well, you haven't even looked at my website. Like, you know very little about me except that you have the sense that I maybe have some expertise which you'd like to have. Yeah. But you're going at it to the end point. Like, you're going at it not to get through the journey, but just to get to the end point of having the credential or the certification. And that's the most. That's not at all what I would want in someone. So, there's lots of stuff out there. If someone gets my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book, and I've had people tell me, like, I downloaded it and I read it in like 8 hours. I'm like,
wow,
that's amazing. Wow. And did you read War and Peace just for like dessert, like afterwards? Like, how did you do that? You know? So, that's kind of what concerns me a little bit is if I'm going to create a credentialing course, it's going to have to be really big and extensive and worthwhile. What's Martin's last name?
I don't know.
McDonald.
Oh, okay.
He's in the UK. Yeah, he has Mac U.
Yeah.
He's put together he's done it right. What they've done is created a specialized, and it fits in with the UK educational system that allows you to become properly certified to be a personal trainer, or nutritional specialist, or whatever terms they use over there. And MACU is like a 1-year dig in, get after it. You know, I don't know if you'd say it's graduate level. It's probably more of a graduate level because he deals with the actual research rather than what the textbooks say. Type of study, and that's a full-time endeavor for him. You know, and he's done a phenomenal job with it. But if people who don't know about that, it wouldn't help you so much even in the States. You probably you should get CEUs if you were to do that. But his is like, it's a year-long program.
Yeah.
Martin McDonald. So he's a phenomenal guy. So that's the way to do it. So it's kind of like all or nothing, because I don't want to like appease, like, I got the fortitude training certification after 4 hours, you know, and now and I'm like, and you forgot it all. You forgot everything I said, like, in 3 hours.
Yeah.
You know, but it's on your Instagram as a, you know, whatever. I'm like, that doesn't serve my purpose of helping people be able to better help others. It actually can be the opposite of that I'm helping people find little ways to sort of brush the dust of their insecurities under the rug by gathering together certifications. I still can't get anyone to, like, I've had like one person so far who can adequately reproduce what a muscle round is.
Really?
On Instagram. Yeah, I've had one person, and I think he was, if I recall right, he was from Germany, so he was doing it in a not even in his mother tongue, but he got it right. So
I'm surprised.
Everyone else missed it. They missed the subtleties of, you know, the whole point of how you set them up. But
let's throw that out there here. I mean, we're at the end of the show here. If people are an hour and a half in, they're dedicated. Let's start there.
That's true.
If
they're asleep and their phone's just playing. You know,
Wait, tune in, guys. Tune in. We need you for a second here. I'm going to put it out there. I want to see it personally. If you can do an actual muscle round, tag me, tag Scott. I want to see it now. Well,
I haven't even watched those so much. What I see are the descriptions of how to do them.
Oh, I thought it was like an actual video.
There's some that aren't, you know, on, you know, that's a whole other topic. But there's, like, no one, like,
just
here's how you do a muscle round. It's like, you know, and and it's right there on my it's on my Instagram. Like, all you have to do is copy and paste, you know, or link. Like, you know, it's hard to get to links on Instagram, but copy and paste my description. It's right there.
Yeah. Hey, George White's with us still. George White's with us to the end.
George is the man. Yeah. Yes. See, George is a veteran. George is when you go to war and you got someone in the trenches and you say, who's going to cover me? And everyone else is like, George is the dude you call on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got some mental fortitude.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And physical.
Yes. All right.
He's a good dude.
Let's call it a day here, Scott. And and we'll have your topic, that other topic, then we can basically call that almost like a part 2. It sounds like segue right into that for that next episode.
It's the other side of the coin that we just looked at. Okay,
awesome. Well, I will look forward to that. And as always, it's been a pleasure. I always enjoy listening and expanding, kind of like my working knowledge of the stuff I'm exploring in the gym.
And I like to chat. So it's a perfect match.
All right, guys, for another episode of Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson, I'm Scott McNally. Head on over to fortitudetraining.net, BYOBBcoach.com. Of course, check out our awesome sponsor, TrueNutrition.com. Use our code ADVICES. We'll catch you next time, guys. See ya.
Thanks, guys. Adios.